year 869, a cataclysmic slave revolt in modern-day Iraq sent shockwaves throughout the Islamic world and beyond. This epic conflict between haves and have-nots, known today as the Zanj Rebellion, first began in the wetlands of southern Iraq, where enslaved Bantu people from East Africa who had been working en masse on farms rose up and overthrew their captors. The conflict eventually escalated to include combatants from all over the Abbasid Empire and claimed as many as 500,000 lives during the course of its 14-year duration. The Zanj Rebellion has been categorised by modern scholars as one of the bloodiest and most destructive rebellions in the history of Western Asia, and the possible catalyst for instability in the region for centuries to come. The Zanj rebels became skilled at both guerrilla warfare and pitched open battles. They held several large cities and vast swathes of land for well over a decade, constructed fortresses, built up a large navy with which they traversed the river networks of Mesopotamia, and even collected taxes and minted their own coins in the areas they held. Although the precise composition of the rebels remains uncertain, both in regards to their exact identity and the proportion of slaves to free men amongst them, their leader was an Arab, and likely born a free man, Ali ibn Muhammad. Accounts differ as to who exactly Ali ibn Muhammad was. Some say he was an Arab from the influential clan, others that he was a Persian. Ali himself claimed to have been descended from the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. Regardless of his origins, Ali appears to have spent part of his youth living in Ray in modern-day Iran, before moving to the Abbasid capital at Samarra in modern-day Iraq. The Abbasids were a dynasty descended from the Prophet Muhammad's uncle, Abbas, from whom they took their name. During their golden age from 775 to 861, they ruled over a huge state which stretched from Algeria to Iran, the vast majority of the Islamic world, and one of the largest empires in history. By the 860s, however, their rule had become marred by civil war and societal unrest. Individual dynasties had begun to break away from the centralised Abbasid government in Iraq, who could do little as the massive, unwieldy state began to fracture. The anarchy at Samarra, which refers to the period of 861 to 870, was marked by extreme internal instability and the violent succession of 4 caliphs, who in turn became puppets to rival military factions. Ali ibn Muhammad was just one of many influential warlords at the time, possibly at first just looking to carve out a small state for himself. He spent much of the 860s in Bahrain on the Arabian Peninsula, where he became the figurehead of a rebellion against the caliphate, which he perceived to be unjustly ruling the people. The rebellion eventually failed, and Ibn found his way to Basra in southern Iraq. It was around this time that, whilst trying to grow his influence in the region and instigate another rebellion against the caliphate, Ali became interested in the conditions of the black slaves who toiled in the marshlands of the area. They were primarily an enslaved Bantu-speaking people known as the Zanj, who had originally been enslaved in East Africa and taken to the Middle East to work on agricultural projects. Before long, Ali began a campaign to liberate and recruit the Zanj and other slaves, promising them freedom and wealth in exchange for their support. As the Zanj rose up and slew their masters, a domino effect coursed through the region as word spread of the rebellion, and downtrodden people from all over the state flocked to Ali's cause. The Zanj quickly became experts at raiding towns, often appearing at night under the cover of darkness, where they would liberate fellow slaves and seize horses, food, and weapons, before disappearing again into the darkness, burning everything they left behind to delay retaliation. The city of Basra fell in September 871, and several retaliatory campaigns from the Caliph failed to subdue the rebellion. The rebels expanded their operations north up the Tigris over the next few years, at their greatest territorial extent, reaching to within 50 miles of Baghdad. Finally, in 879, the Caliph sent his son Abul Abbas to combat the rebels with a major force. The Caliph himself soon joined the fight, and by 883, the stronghold of Al-Muqtara fell, and Ali, along with all of the rebel commanders, were either killed or surrendered. The numbers involved in the rebellion can never be known, as very little record remains of the period. However, mortality estimates range from 100,000 to as high as 2.5 million. We know the rebellion caused great disruption in economic activity in the region, and it caused extensive damage to the districts it took place in. Both sides engaged in widespread looting and violence against local populations, and even instances of cannibalism are recorded to have taken place during this time. German scholar Theodor Noldecker even went so far as to argue that the area never fully recovered from the Zanj Rebellion, such was the societal instability that followed in its wake. The Abbasid state certainly didn't recover, only barely holding on to power afterwards against renewed Byzantine attacks from Anatolia, and other civil conflicts taking place throughout this period. The Islamic world would remain largely fractured for the next several hundred years, until finally being reunified to a certain extent as a result of the Crusades.